All aboard, everyone. Welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast. It is the Turkish Grand Prix review episode. I'm Freddie Coates. I'm going to be your host today, and I'm joined with two excellent co-presenters who absolutely know their stuff when it comes to the Turkish Grand Prix of 2021. We're going to espouse some opinions. We're going to criticize things. We're probably going to disagree on things. Yes, because it's us. I'm here with Adam Dickinson and Nigel Chu. How are you guys? Adam, tell us how you are. Apparently, you were hit by a tornado last night.
Well, not me physically. It didn't like hit me in the face and then like hit me with a cow and then just like walk off to Kansas
tornado
to take Dorothy.
Tornado,
yeah, you should have seen the other guy. Yeah, it was good. I had a good weekend in Dallas over the weekend and shouted a lot, which is why this podcast will be a good test of my voice. And yeah, and then came back to a tornado running through Norman. So that was interesting, but it wasn't like we're fine. It didn't. I think it missed us or it didn't touch down until after us. So we got some time in the storm shelter, which is an indoor basketball court, but there are people sitting under the basket, so we couldn't play, which is disappointing. But
rude.
You know, you move.
Nigel, any stormy experiences for you?
No.
Oh. No. Well, are you doing okay?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah,
this is the kind of high quality meandering you get on a podcast. Podcasts, you know, they're mediums of lots of conversation and narrative.
Just say yes or no.
What did you think about your feelings at the moment, Nigel?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a great question. What do I think about? I'm not sure is the answer to that.
See, if I ask a question that's got any substance to it, you don't know anything. So I've got to I've got to spoon feed you questions. So that's the kind of thing. So let's start with the big topic of the race. Actually, no, it's a topic of the race. And Nigel, we're going to start with you. I'm going to ask you the first question and then we can get into the topic. So Nigel, who won the race?
Which race?
The Turkish Grand Prix of 2021.
The F1 one. It was Valtteri Bottas, maybe.
Cool, thank you. Adam, now, because Nigel's given us his statement, his one words, you can give us an opinion on Valtteri Bottas' win.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me who won, but then like I wasn't allowed to say the same person as Nigel because that's what we do for predictions, and then like I just have to make up someone else.
You could predict the result of a race that's already happened. Yes.
Okay, I think Bottas is going to win. Anyway,
that's not someone different to what Nigel said.
I was just like, I don't know where this drive came from, really. Like, he's been consistently bad in the wet, and then just out of nowhere, he had a really good race. He said after the race he thought it was one of his best ever, which I'd agree with. And yeah, he just seemed to have it under control. It's one of those races where you don't really see the leader that much because they're just out ahead, doing fine. There's under no pressure. You know, with Verstappen behind him as well. And he had Verstappen behind him for the majority of the race, and he just seemed fine with it. I'm just slightly confused more than anything as to where this kind of whether Bottas has been for 7 years or how, not 7, 6, 5, something like that. But yeah, it's good for Valtteri. I'm glad he got a win this season before he went to Alfa Romeo. And yeah, nice for him. He didn't say like F you or anything on the radio, which was a bit of a shame, but Mercedes gave us a Valtteri it's James message at the end. So, you know, the memes can carry on coming.
No, brilliant drive. No, absolutely fantastic drive. Didn't put a foot wrong. And like Adam said, it's strange that this has come out of nowhere because normally he doesn't have the best record in the wet, at least when he's been at Mercedes. But this has to be arguably his best win in F1 out of his 10 wins. So fantastic effort. He knew as well that Hamilton would have his grid penalty as early as Friday, perhaps even before, because the team probably would have talked about it for a week or two. So he delivered when the pressure was on, took points away from Verstappen. Mercedes outscored Red Bull as well, mainly thanks to Bottas's win. So it was a perfect job, really, and he deserves a win as well. I think he's driven pretty well overall, and yeah, it was good that he's got the win. I don't think there's much to add. He just didn't make any mistakes at all. It always looked like it was going to happen, really.
Yeah, what did you give him your ratings?
9. He didn't qualify first.
That's true.
He got pole, but he didn't qualify first.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think I completely agree with it. Just never looked like anyone else could win this race, even when Leclerc was in the lead. And going for that gamble, which we'll talk about later on the tyres, it just kind of felt he was ragged. But Bottas just had everything under control, and I think for Leclerc to keep the pace in the early stints with Bottas and Verstappen was because Bottas and Verstappen had it under control, and I think Leclerc was just pushing and pushing and pushing so hard to actually keep that pace. But he did well with that. We'll get onto that, I'm sure. But I think, I do. I think what made this amazing was how much pace Bottas had in hand. He went 2 seconds quicker than, like a second quicker on his final lap than everyone else. That was his final lap of the race. He's just like, you know what, I can push now. Oh, I really can push now. And he dominated it on pace really at the end. He had so much in hand. And I think he did a really good job. And he didn't crack under the pressure, which he sometimes does. And that's crucial. I think this and Monza, he's been two of his best drives in a long, long time, I think.
I think the key moment was because Verstappen was about 2
when he was
to 3
sacked.
seconds. He was 2 to 3 seconds behind Verstappen for most of the first stint, but then just before he pitted, Bottas pulled out about 5-second gaps, and then that undercut threat completely went. So that was a crucial moment, and it goes with what you said, Freddie, about having pace in hand.
Yeah,
whether that's the Mercedes car or Bottas, being out in front in the wet conditions, probably both, probably. So,
well, I was going to ask you, do you
job.
think it is just absolute driver and machine working in absolute harmony? Because the Mercedes has looked the class of the field this weekend more than probably at any point in the year, I think. From Mercedes side, maybe Portugal, but apart from that,
I think the last 3 weekends Mercedes have been quite clearly ahead for me, and they haven't quite taken full advantage of that. So I think Red Bull, we're thinking they've got a bit of catching up to do, but you have to do what you can with the tools, and that's what Bottas did. But yeah, I do think the car definitely played a part, I'd say.
First consecutive Mercedes wins since Portimao and Barcelona, I think.
Yeah.
And only the second time we've had consecutive Mercedes wins this year, which is testament
surprising
to either their mistakes and to Red Bull's success. Adam, what do you think of the fact that, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a question. Do you have anything else to say?
On the race?
On Bottas.
Do you think we should just cut the podcast here? But
do you think Bottas has got more coming this season this way then? Do you think there's a mindset shift that's helped?
Well, let's put it this way. If Hamilton was in pole position, Bottas probably wouldn't have won, would he?
Yeah, I think
if it was a straight fight.
That's what I was going to say. I think, it a bit like Nigel said with Ricciardo after Spa, I think there is kind of that element of his teammate who was also in the most dominant car wasn't there. So, yeah, I think, it will depend on how the championship fight goes between Verstappen and Hamilton. I think maybe, just the having his move to Alfa Romeo released and kind of it's all out that there's no kind of having to drive for the seat or anything like that might have helped with a mindset shift. We've seen that with other drivers over the past few years, but I think circumstance is the main thing. If Mercedes have a faster car and Hamilton isn't there, we can see more of it. But I think if there's a closer gap to Red Bull and Verstappen and Hamilton, is in that window, or Hamilton is in that window, to be honest, it didn't have to be both, then I think, we'll have to kind of wait for that to really know if it is a permanent mindset shift or not. But it's nice to see him being happy again and winning.
Definitely is. One driver who obviously didn't pose a challenge, but got the best he could really this weekend, I think, is Max Verstappen. I think second place, because of Hamilton's engine power, pretty decent, because I think this could well have been a nailed-on Merc 1-2 if Hamilton hadn't had his ICE penalty. He said at the end of the race that the hardest part was staying awake, which raised a few eyebrows and brought a few chuckles. Just doing the job, really. I think that's all we can really say. He had good pace in qualifying. Nigel, me and you were talking off the podcast earlier about this maybe not necessarily being his strongest weekend because of the car characteristics.
Yeah, I just think Red Bull was slower, and I think they've been so the last three races. Yet weirdly, Verstappen has had one more point than Hamilton from Monza, Sochi, and now Turkey. Uh, so I wouldn't have expected that. I thought Hamilton can at least gain 15 points over these three races, but even with Verstappen's grid penalty and stuff, Verstappen kind of like Alonso in 2012, he's just like maximised the last few races or couple of races. Yes, he had some luck last time out, but he is maximising his results, and that's all you can do if you're in a car that's a bit slower. So yeah, he didn't really make any mistakes in practice. He didn't quite look completely on it, but when it matters most, uh, he was there, I guess. Yeah, like where he should be. And I think it was bold from Red Bull to be the first of the lead cars to pit as well. Because no one knew at that time whether you shouldn't have pitted or not. But they were the first ones to pit with about 20 laps ago, wasn't it? With when Verstappen pitted. So I thought that was a great. Well, it was the perfect move, wasn't it? Because then he came out ahead of Perez and Hamilton. So yeah, I think he'll be happy with how the last couple of weekends have gone.
Yeah, I think if you look at if you look at the Austria weekends where Red Bull clearly had the pace advantage and Verstappen gained 20 points on Hamilton over those two races. So to have a similar-ish situation over the last three and, like you say, to not lose any grounds, to actually gain some ground is pretty fantastic for Verstappen. I think he'll be really happy as long as they believe that there's more coming on the horizon. That's got to be the key. If this is a kind of general pace shift to Mercedes, then Red Bull are in trouble, really, because I don't think they can carry on doing this forever. But, you'd imagine there will be some races over the season where they do come back strong. I don't know, maybe Brazil. They've kind of
it's a topic for another podcast, really.
Yeah, but
you've got 6 races to go, and I think probably Cota's fair game for both, but Mexico, Brazil, Red Bull, and the other 3, I think that Middle East trio, I think Mercedes. And I'd say, arguably, at this point, I mean, we'll probably talk about this more in between Cota and now, but I would say, arguably, this is the point of the season since really May that it's looked sort of most favourite for Mercedes rather than Red Bull.
Yeah, I think so.
Adam? Yeah, I'll agree.
Cool. He doesn't want to agree, does he? He doesn't want to.
No. I'd not thought about it enough when Freddie said it, and I couldn't think about it quick enough to mount a defence or agreement either way. So
we'll talk about that more in the future, because it is a big topic when you talk about car performance and championship, and 6 races, still 6 races to go. It's the start of October. We've got 6 races still to go. It's crazy. But yeah, 3rd place was Sergio Perez, a return to the podium. Not since Paul Ricard has he been on the podium. His 3rd podium for Red Bull Racing. He should have been on the podium much sooner, but that was a good drive. It was the drive he needed to do, the drive that was needed. Apart from qualifying, the race he recovered from qualifying well in the race, I think. And yeah, nice little defense of Hamilton. One of the most exciting bits of races we've seen from them two in ages, really.
Absolutely. And he managed his tyres as well pretty well. And he was probably one of the fastest drivers on the second set of intermediates, which helped him attack Leclerc, caught Leclerc, then overtook him to get onto the podium. And the battle with Hamilton was good, hard racing, wasn't it? Yeah, I absolutely loved that. Even though like the Mercedes, a straight line speed, absolutely ridiculous. But Perez on the brakes super late at turn 12 and turn 1, and held off Hamilton just. So great racing, great racecraft from both drivers, actually.
It was an absolute send into turn 1. Yeah, Adam.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, like, along the same lines, I didn't. When I saw it happen, I thought he's going off. Like, I did not think he'd stay on the track at all there. And then, like, he did. He just, I don't know, he seemed to have, like, twice as much grip as Hamilton, which was just, mind-blowing, really. I thought Hamilton had set up the move really well through kind of this back third of the track. And, it's just like the last thing. He was nearly ahead by a car length on the straight. He tried to move over to the inside, but he just wasn't far enough ahead. And then, yeah, Perez, I don't know. I don't know if he has like more breaks or like he's talking to like the tarmac gods or whatever, but something worked very well for him. And yeah, he was able to stick it up the inside, break far later than Hamilton and keep the position. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. One of the better pieces of on-track action.
He spoke about it after the race, and he just said, "Yeah, I just hope it just went for it, and it worked, which is great." So I've got a lot of respect for that. He said that Max owes him a couple of tequilas as well because the job he did to hold him up. Because really, there's a lot to say about if Hamilton had got past where he could have ended up. There's a lot of what ifs on Hamilton's race, which we're going to talk about now. Lewis Hamilton obviously started in 11th place after qualifying in first place with a really dominant qualifying session, actually. Really, in Q2 particularly, he was just way ahead of everyone else. I think he was like 6 or 7 tenths clear. If I'm right. Obviously not if I'm wrong. But yeah, and he had to come through the field. He spent a few laps behind Tsunoda, but then really sort of started picking them off until he got to Perez, where he got a little bit more held up. But then came the question of whether to hang out for the whole race on the set of intermediates that he started on. And that's where things go a bit awry. Eventually, after a lot of debate with the team, and with no opportunity of being ahead of Perez or being ahead of even Leclerc, Hamilton eventually did come into pit and ended up coming back out from track position of 3rd place into 5th place. And because of the, strange, bizarre, weird, unusual, bad nature of Pirelli tyres, they go through a ridiculous graining stage, and then that meant they're just kind of bumpy and uneven tyres before they get to a kind of slick to mediate.
Which makes them quick.
Which makes them quick.
So they go slow, then
essentially,
quick.
they go slow, and then they get to basically a really soft tyre that has longevity and can work at low temperatures. So a really good dry tyre. But anyway, but before they get to that, they lose all pace, and they left that too late in the race to get any of that pace, and it was just consolidating the position and points for Hamilton. Now, Nigel, what do you think? What do you think Hamilton and Mercedes should have done? Do you think they should have pitted? Do you think they should have gone for the gamble and stayed out? Do you think they should have done anything different?
Hamilton should have listened first time. He should have pitted when the team told him to, because then I reckon he would have had 4th place, because Leclerc went a lot longer, didn't he? And then so Hamilton would have gone through the graining phase, and then he would have had fast pace when Leclerc was on his out laps or something like that. So I think Hamilton made a mistake. I think Mercedes, but the thing is, once he didn't pit, they probably should have committed, because if you go for like a halfway house strategy, it never really works. You got to commit one way or the other, and they didn't. But equally, I don't think they could have afforded a puncher or so, to lose 10, 12 points. Because if you look at Ocon's pace and Ocon's tyres at the end, they had a hole in the right front tyre, and Ocon didn't pit. So it was a cautious strategy, but they probably pitted too late. The communication didn't sound that great either, because Hamilton didn't know he was going to lose 2 places. But it's not the worst mistake strategy-wise Mercedes have done this year. I always banged on about strategy because I'm an absolute strategy nerd. But they've only lost to me probably 3 points. I think a podium was unlikely. So a 3-point loss isn't too bad, and I think they've made worse calls this year. So I'm not going to beat them up too much for it.
Not even a 3-point loss, 2-point loss.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
I think that point's really crucial to remember. Is like, it's not really that much on the grand scheme of things. I agree. I think Hamilton should have listened the first time and pitted, and then had the chance to go for it at the end. But yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world. I think it's just, like you say, maybe miscommunication. You didn't know what position he was when he came out of the pits to 5th. So yeah, I just think it's after Russia where they made the right strategy call kind of against Hamilton's better judgment, or that's what it felt like at the time. I don't know I don't know kind of whether that affected the balance or whether this time they wanted to listen to him, or, I don't know whether that had an effect or not. But regardless, yeah, I think, it's one of those. It's a few points, and yeah, I think if they can learn from this, that'll be the main thing, because they, like Nigel says, they've made a few strategy errors this season, and that's just what's costing them in the fight at the moment, really, above anything else. So yeah, it's one of those. They'll move to America and they'll carry on. It's not, it's not terminal for their title fight at all. Just on the qualifying as well, I think it's the first time that Hamilton has topped all 3 sessions since Bahrain last year. So it's been a long time for someone who is generally one of the best qualifiers around. And yeah, so very dominant from him. Wasn't able to turn it into a race win, obviously, but he'll move.
Yeah, Adam, you raised the point that I was going to say about, we just come off the back of a race where Merck's all-seeing knowledge of strategy from a strategy wall paid off. And there's every reason to have believed it would have, like you guys have said, taken the safe option. That the reason Leclerc took the gamble was because he's Leclerc. He's 7th in the championship. He's what is it, like 150 points off the lead. And he had the opportunity to go for a win, which Ferrari don't often have. And whereas Mercedes are in the fight for a title, and you've got to consolidate, you've got to buckle down. He was in a damage limitation race already, all through the build up to the weekend, as we've got to limit the damage. They were doing a fantastic job by doing that already, by not letting Verstappen win the race, keeping Verstappen in the best he could do in second. Which meant that the difference is so little anyway in between the two comparatively. The gap in the championship is still less than a win. So if Hamilton goes out and gets first place in Kota next race and Verstappen comes second with fastest lap, then they're level on points, but Hamilton would be presumably in the lead. I don't know, actually, maybe Verstappen would be on countback, but I don't know, but they'd be level. So it's not like it's put him like out of action. Like, it's not like he's been in the lead and then he's pitted and come out 10th. He was in 3rd place, but probably wouldn't have stayed there and would have been probably 5th anyway, I think. So maybe 4th, depending on Leclerc's grading stage. We don't know. But
what complicates it is that, in my opinion, Hamilton is the best driver in the field on his tyres, as we've seen multiple times over the years. So then there is that thing that he could have made it work. And if he maintained his lap times, even with Perez's pace, he would have been on for 3rd. But it's just that question of whether his tyres would have fell off the cliff. But he's just so good with his tyres, isn't he? So that's the only thing that's kind of in the back of my head, thinking maybe they should have gone for it. But ultimately, it was probably the right call, just a bit too late. But
I think for me, if it were like a C2, C1 hard tyre, maybe. But I think because it was the intermediate, which is a tyre that is such an unknown. I mean, it's been a relatively similar compound since sort of 2018, 2017 anyway, but you don't get consistent intermediate running. That's so rare to get an intermediate phase that's 20 laps or more anyway. And even in practice, they had some intermediate running, but Mercedes did 3 laps in practice? In practice 3.
5 laps. Yeah.
5 laps, there we go. Yeah. So there's no intermediate knowledge. It's a hard tyre to take risks on in that stage in a championship fight, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was exactly about to say, that it's, if it was a tyre they knew more about, I'd say fair enough. We know how good Hamilton is. I mean, look at Bahrain at the start of the season for some mega defensive driving on tyres. But, if it goes wrong, then they're losing 10 to 15 points. It's just not worth it at all at this stage. So I think it's just not something that they can really risk, because that really puts them on the back foot. As it is, they're 6 points behind Verstappen. If they were much further behind, that would have been a big issue. If he goes out and wins at Austin next week or next race, then they'll be back in the lead of the championship. So it's just not worth it for Mercedes. And like you say, Leclerc was in 1st and 7th in the championship. He had the chance to go with that gamble, and fair play. But
yeah, I think that's been the general consensus post-race, is that the team it could have probably been done better, but it's worked out all right. It's not awful. It's the way it goes. And to be honest, there probably wasn't anything too better that could have been done at that time. They put themselves in the position, and it's worked out fine. There's been a lot going around about Lewis being annoyed about it, but yeah, because he racing driver trusts his gut. But like we've said, sometimes the pit wall, with all their computers and all their strategy and all their knowledge, particularly in a strange race where the conditions weren't going to change, like yesterday, where the conditions were relatively level for the whole thing, where it's rare in a wet race where the strategy calls can be made with sort of such certainty from the pit wall. But in this one, there was a possibility of it. So that was fine, really. And yeah, Ocon obviously did do the full 58 lap race and one set of intermediates, which again, we're all for a bit of a bold strategy, and it got him 10th place, got him a point. But he was 5 seconds slower than Giovinazzi on the last lap, and Giovinazzi wasn't actually that fast that race. He denied team orders at one point. That's how slow he was. And yeah, so I think there's every possibility that Hamilton could have finished in 7th, 8th behind Norris and Gasly, and if Gasly hadn't had his 5-second penalty, probably definitely in 6th. But it's worked out nicely. Yeah, we've touched on Charles Leclerc going for the win. He had a really good weekend, I think. Qualifying 3rd and being able to stick at the pace early on. And then when Bottas and Verstappen were pit, he ended up in the lead, and they just thought, you know what the hell? Let's go for the win. And I thought it was really fun for a bit. What did you guys make of it? Adam, at any point did you think this might work?
I didn't think it would work in terms of the win. There was one point where he said, "So do I have to stop? So will I have to stop it all?" So yeah, good weekend for him overall, and he kind of got himself in the position to, I don't think win, but maybe fight for a podium position. And in the end, it didn't work out for him. But he started 4th, he finished 4th with Hamilton kind of rampaging up from behind, and he had he was in the race lead for a while and had the chance to go for the win. So I think that counts as a pretty good weekend really for him. And he wasn't, after Hamilton pitted, he wasn't really under pressure at the end of the race either. So I think a very good weekend for Charles Leclerc, really. It would have been cool if it had won. I don't know when the last no-stopper win was, but it would have been a nice trivia question.
It was the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix when Olivier Panis won for Ligier.
Oh, there we go.
Not when?
2005 when.
Oh, it still had pit stops though, arguably.
Oh God, yeah.
For tyres, yeah.
Tire, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah. But yeah, that would have been very impressive, and it didn't happen. But again, I think started 4th, finished 4th. Good weekend for him.
Yeah, I thought for a couple of laps when the gap was stable and Bottas was probably going through the grading phase, like he might do it, but his tyres just fell off the cliff. He probably gave away a podium because he was only about it was a few seconds behind Verstappen, wasn't he? So if he pitted at a similar time, I think Leclerc would have been on the podium. But you have to go for it, don't you? If you're Ferrari or any team like that. So I don't blame them for it. And I think what was impressive was in the first half of the race, he was staying with Bottas and Verstappen. I thought he would start to fall back, but to keep it up, he was doing some fastest laps as well. So that was really, really good. Strong qualifying as well. He pulled a big lap out at the very end of Q3. So yeah, what a very, very strong weekend from Charles Leclerc.
I think his early pace is what didn't help his no-stop attempt at the end. Because like you say, he was pushing and pushing and pushing. He was closer to Max than Max was to Valtteri. Yeah. And like you said earlier, there was a 5 or 6 second gap between Bottas and Verstappen when they pit. But Leclerc was 2 seconds at points, 1.5 seconds behind Verstappen. And I think that's probably pushing at that level probably didn't help him when he was going out on his own later on down the line. I think then he didn't really have a reference for tyre wear or anything like that. And he was just on his own and on worn tyres. And he had a few nasty locks, a few nasty moments where he did lose a chunk of time. He would lose like 2.5 seconds. A couple of times he had big deficits at that point. which in the long run probably kept him fourth place because it meant that he was overtaken by Bottas sooner. But would probably if this plan had been thought about earlier on, they could have said, "Oh, we're going to do Plan D." Or something, and no one would know about it. Only Leclerc would be like, okay, cool, I've got to conserve a lot early on to get to the end. And it'd be more like Plan QQ 57 or something. It's like that far down the pecking order, probably. But
the new James Bond character.
Yeah, QQ 57.
It could be SOF, stay out forever. That could work as well.
Yeah, the SOF strategy. But if they'd planned that earlier on, maybe it would have had a chance. And I think that's probably similar with Ocon. Probably if they planned it earlier, and with Hamilton again, it would have paid off a bit better. But it's one of those ones on the hoof that you may as well try, may as well have a bit of fun. Yeah. And it was a bit of fun, and definitely lost him the podium.
Oh well.
Oh well, exactly, completely. No. Someone who wasn't fighting for the podium and definitely lost everything was Sebastian Vettel, who made a gamble to go on slicks. Hooray!
It wasn't a gamble, it was just stupid. I mean, the track was nowhere near dry. Oh, nowhere.
It was a bit of fun though.
Yeah, but it probably cost him points, isn't it? So
whatever.
I don't know. It never looked like it was going to be dry, especially at that point in the race. So I'm not sure what Vettel was thinking, because 4-time world champion, 14 years of experience. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why would you go mediums as well? Like, go on the softs if you're going to do it. So it was a bizarre choice because there was hardly even a dry line at the end of the race, and that's what you need. So just a bit of a blunder, I guess.
I think they just wanted to go for something ridiculous to just see what would happen. I mean, I think they probably felt, oh, we're not going to get anywhere. We're in a bit of a no man's land here.
Dangerous, like especially when they went through turn 8. Like God,
it did become that a little bit kind of like, oh my goodness me, going so slowly. Normally you'd pull up if you're going at that pace. You'd be told to pull up.
Where was he when he pitted?
11th or 12th, something like that.
Yeah.
He probably would have got 10th place. Really,
I mean, that's
maybe
the thing,
lost 1 point.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing though. Like, if there doesn't seem to be any kind of rhyme or reason to the decision. Like, it's just kind of like going for a gamble for the sake of going for a gamble. It just seems like a really bizarre. I'm all for teams trying things, but only when there's some like modicum of sense to that. If you had,
I think there was
been a couple of crashes up ahead, then he would have, made a few positions. Like, it just seems pour this into gamble away, a few points based off astronomically small chance of making up ground.
I think there was a kind of thought with kind of like, well, these Inters are so slick anyway. Maybe if we can heat these up, if we can get a little bit of heat, maybe. But then that makes you think, well, why they not go onto the soft tires, which is a bit of a friendlier tire for that kind of thing. But I think, it was just. I think Vettel said something like, "It was tempting to try," and I can get that. If you're in 11th, if you're in 11th and you're sort of just on a cusp, and you don't know how the race is going to play out, you don't know what's going to happen later on, and you think maybe there's, even if it is a 25-75 kind of thing, I think he had a bit of a.
It was a 95-5. That's being generous.
I get it from a racist perspective of let's do something rather than just plod along.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you guys have nothing else to say on that, clearly.
Yeah, it was. I mean,
zero or hero, and it was definitely zero. And I think they've not even tried to shy from that. Imagine if they defended it. That would be amazing. Yeah. I'd love it if they came out with a statement and were like,
I can see we defend our decision. Doing that, to be fair.
I can see Lawrence Stroll doing it. Big old boss man.
Low rakes after. Anyway.
Well, other questionable calls this weekend were the 5-second penalty for Pierre Gasly for his lap 1 incident with Alonso, where he did nothing wrong and got a 5-second penalty. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, he got sandwiched, didn't he? I mean, he could have got a little bit more to the inside, but even if he did, I still think there would have been contact.
Yeah,
or that. So I'm not really sure. It's just a 3 into 1 doesn't go, and it was your classic turn 1 incident, I think. So I didn't really understand the penalty for that. Yeah, nothing else to add. I don't think it was a one of the strangest penalty decisions this year, I think.
What do you think, Adam?
Yeah,
disagree.
No, I think when I first saw it, to be fair, I thought that should be a penalty. But then looking back, it's kind of, I think once you see it from all angles, it just seemed quite harsh. I think I think it was quite impressive of Alonso to actually know it was Gasly that hit him, to be honest, as he was spinning, because it's chaos at the start, especially in a wet race. So to have that spatial awareness, I think speaks volumes about Alonso. But on the wider point, yeah, I think it's pretty rough. I don't know whether they're kind of going off, giving more penalties at the start of the season or what. But
in the official document about the penalty, there's a quote that I saw that I thought was kind of wrong, that said the stewards do not consider this incident as an unavoidable lap 1, turn 1 contact between two cars, as Gasly was not sandwiched between two cars when he touched Alonso's car. So I think what they're saying there is Alonso had overtaken him too much at that point, because it was front right to rear left. And I'm trying to get into their mindset there, because the reason Gasly was where he was because Alonso had overtaken him. Was overtaking him because Perez had made a pretty decent start. It wasn't, and Gasly gave room to a car and didn't block one car, and in doing so, another car overtook him. And because the overtake was going well, that means that Gasly should be penalised. That's kind of what I'm reading into there, and I do think it was a lap 1, turn 1 racing incident. To be honest. I don't think the stewards really have many legs to stand on. I mean, I know they do have legs, but
normally with penalties like this, then there should be a kind of way of looking at it after the penalty and going, so in future drivers should do this to avoid a penalty and whatever. Like, that's kind of the way I think about it, and I really don't see what he could have done any differently here. As soon as they went into the first corner at a racetrack, there's going to be cars 3 wide. There's going to be cars 3 wide on the first corner of a F1 race. So I think it's pretty harsh. I quite liked Alonso then just ramming Schumacher later on as some kind of retaliation. But
we'll move on to that now, because that was arguably a justifiable 5-second penalty as Alonso's race fell apart, trying to get back at it, and he just dive bombed and made probably a Perez-esque lunge, if you will, but wasn't Perez doing it on Hamilton, and was also further back into not really an overtaking place on the track. Spun Schumacher around and got given the same penalty that Gasly got.
I mean, I would just like to say as well, it was a really neat spin from Alonso on the first corner to actually.
He well held.
Yeah, it was a shame that it was the first corner, because he probably, if it was later in the race, he might not have lost that much time or position from it. But yeah, I think that was a much more clear-cut penalty, really. It was just a misjudgment and punting Schumacher, really. It's the kind of thing you see on unranked online racing a lot. But yeah, I don't really see how it makes sense that they're the same penalty, but yeah, stewards.
Yeah, well, Gasly got the same amount of penalty points as Bottas did for turn 1 at Hungary. So who knows?
I don't know whether that's kind of what influenced them. Whether they thought, points? we gave this amount of penalty.
But that was so different.
I know. I completely know.
Yeah,
I know, but
I
just that's the only thing I can think of, is whether they thought, we were harsh on the turn 1 incident there, so we need to be have kind of put our foot down a bit more here. That's the only real thinking I can get
every year we always seem to think there should be consistent stewards, and I wonder why we think that. Maybe they should have the same stewards at every race, because they have the same race director and same drivers. Shocked.
Not always, to be fair.
Not always.
Sometimes they have different ones.
Yeah,
there are different ones last year.
Driver this weekend because Alan van der Merwe doesn't like to get vaccinated.
Let's not.
Well, last year's Turkish Grand Prix, we had some different drivers, and things change. We had
That's true.
Grosjean
Danny
last year,
Kvyat was there.
Magnussen. Yeah, Danny Kvyat. So they do change the drivers, just not with the same regularity.
Adams of the third car, guest car, wild card, every race group, which I am too. I think we should have a wild card F1 category. Like Lucas Degrassi was at DTM this weekend.
Last year I wanted to, instead of like doing the COVID calendar that we did,
I wanted to do drive an F1 race instead.
I wanted to like stick with the original one and just have races like twice a week, every week until like December. And then like you just have a rotating cast of drivers coming in and out. Like each team would have four. They'd bring it, it'd be fantastic. No, you do the original calendar. That was the whole point. It's a way to keep the original calendar on going. So you started Australia and do the whole like 23 races, and that'd be fantastic. And then you'd have like midweek races. You could just have like bang qualifying, bang race, and then you've got like some random guy in a car, like Ragunathan in a car, just like driving around. It's like, hey, that's fun. And then it would have been amazing, but it didn't happen. So there we are.
You'd like IndyCar, Adam. Anyway, yeah, there's a few other little talking points. Do we think Hamilton should have taken this penalty for his engine? Just yes or no?
No.
Is that in hindsight?
It was for some kind of reliability issue. But if it was tactical, I am in the camp that it was completely wrong. I've thought, over the last few weeks that they should do it in Mexico. But,
you can't overtake in Mexico. The DRS doesn't work there.
Yeah, but the field spreads out more. Cars often get like lapped up to like fifth place because like there's a bigger difference between the midfield and the front cars for me.
Adam?
So
I think in hindsight, at the start of the weekend, I was like, nah. I think in hindsight, maybe I think it was a bit of a better decision. I think having Bottas on song really helped that. But yeah, it's kind of especially if he'd been able to finish third, that would have been a really good result. As it was, I don't think it's the worst decision, kind of looking back at it, but it's one of those.
I think it would have been this kind of position wherever he was, if I'm honest.
I agree.
If it was Kota, if it was Mexico, if it was Jeddah, maybe. If you say that late, then there's something wrong. But I kind of feel like maybe fifth or fourth would have been it anyway.
If they've got an issue, this engine is going to be on the limit to do 7 races, isn't it?
Well, it's not going to do all of them. That's the thing. It's to introduce a new one to the pool.
I don't know.
It's to take the stress off all 3 of them, not to
even if
punish one.
Because the last engine has only done what? 3 races.
Exactly. So now they've got essentially an engine.
2 races on Spa, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's got a little bit in it to just kind of, they've got a bit of leeway. They don't have to have that.
But if they've got a problem, which is what they're saying, then,
Well, yeah, but they're not saying they've got a problem with a specific engine. They're saying they had a problem with Bottas's engine, and that's given them worries about this engine.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
They've not specifically said that there's a Hamilton engine they've had to completely retire, apart from the one that went pop in Zandvoort FP2. And that's fair enough. And they've got essentially a really worn engine they can use in practice sessions, say, and 2 engines they can cycle through 4-6 races, one that's done 1 race and one that's done 2 or 3. So that's about it.
I don't know.
I think they need an extra engine in the pool. I think they should just change the rules and make it 4 engines, because we have this every year, and it just costs more for them to do the R&D, which they can't really do anymore anyway because of this. I mean, yeah, they can do the reliability upgrade, but that's about it. So I think just make it a 4 engine limit anyway. Can't be bothered with this rule anymore.
If they change it later, you have like a bigger offset to Red Bull in terms of like engine power and like the freshness of the engines. That's another factor. Whereas now they've only got like a 1 race offset. If they did it in Mexico,
but you just got to do it. It's the kind of thing you've got to get over and done with, surely.
Yeah, but
surely
with an old engine,
the more you keep it, the more threat you have.
He would have won this weekend. 100%. 25 points.
If he'd gone another weekend, then Verstappen could well have won. Probably.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then he'll have that fresh engine for the remaining races. But if you
lose a win and have a penalty, we've had this discussion before, Nigel. If you lose a win and have a penalty, you lose more than losing a bit from one penalty.
Yeah,
We'll find out.
I agree.
We will find out, but I don't think this is the be all and end all of the championship. I think.
Oh no, of course not. No.
I think Verstappen's lucky that he got second in Sochi rather than Hamilton's unlucky that he didn't win this race, to be honest. But luck pisses me off. So let's move on. We've also had this discussion. Daniel Ricciardo is written in the document by whoever put it in there.
Okay, yeah.
How many false dawns have we had with Daniel Ricciardo this year? How many
he won a race.
Correct sunsets have we had? Is that the opposite of a false dawn?
Is it a sunset? It's one.
I don't know.
It's a
bad
11th. Weekend.
So I think
11th
from a bad qualifying is all right, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a like bad weekend. I think like he should have been higher. It wasn't really McLaren's track. You know, Norris could only finish 7th. It wasn't really a factor throughout the race. I thought, he was. It just wasn't. Yeah, it was. Ferrari seemed to be doing better, or certainly Leclerc. So, yeah, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not that. You know, we can see in the next races where Ricciardo pans out, but I don't think this is kind of the end of his Monza run. I think it's a bad result. We'll see.
It's another bad result.
It's another bad result, but he's had lots of other good results, and I kind of think it's the way his season's going is plus minus. It peaks, troughs. It's not steady.
I think it's more minus.
I think this is more like Norris's first season in McLaren in 2019. To be fair, and Norris has had time with his McLaren car, and he's doing really well. Give Ricciardo time, probably would be doing similar.
Norris was a complete rookie.
Yeah, exactly. So he had an easier bed to work on, arguably.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Ricciardo, he won 2 races ago and then he finished 4th at Sochi. I don't think either of them were bad results, and then he's had one bad one here. I really don't think there's that much to look into. Drivers have bad races.
No,
drivers have bad races from time to time, and if it is
time to time. You see the first half of the season.
So
he's doing better.
He's been poor this. Yeah, he's been poor this season. But if we take it from Monza, then you'd expect him to not be on fire every single week. So if this is the one bad result and then he goes back to finishing,
also he's not like he was 16th and Norris was first. He was or second or third.
Yeah.
Norris was 8th in qualifying. This wasn't a McLaren weekend, to be fair.
If he goes and has good performances for the rest of the season, that's fine. It's one bad result.
It's too bad. The pace deficit in Sochi, 3 or 4 attempts per lap, that's not acceptable if you're Daniel Ricciardo. And if you're having this many bad weekends, that's not acceptable if you're Daniel Ricciardo. You can't be having these bad weekends. You can't be getting knocked out in Q1 if you're Ricciardo in the McLaren when your teammate's getting Q3 every weekend. You can't be doing that.
What do you want to happen?
Yeah,
get into Q3.
No,
do you think he doesn't deserve to be there?
What should McLaren do? What should F1 ban him? Like what's the end game to this vitriol?
Well, what should happen is we'll see how it goes. But you can't say that he's not had a bad season.
That's what we've been saying. That's what we've been saying this whole conversation. It's just a result. We don't care. Just see how he goes.
We're not saying that he's had a bad season.
Has he had a bad season? Yes or no?
He has had a bad season. He's obviously had a bad season. You can't seriously think we're sitting here going, "Oh my god, he's this far off Norris. What a great driver." Yeah. It's like I don't. What I think Asman and I are saying here.
My problem is it's not one bad result. It's he's had probably 8 or 9 bad events this year, and that's atrocious.
But the trend now is
not good.
Better. The trend now is better than it was then.
He won a race.
There has been improvement, and I think
did he win a race?
Yes,
exactly.
He win a race well.
So was Pastor Maldonado. So was Olivier Panis.
Oh yeah, Valtteri Bottas was awful this weekend.
Yeah, that result from 25 years ago.
Yeah, really Lewis Hamilton's won a world championship, but it's just winning races. Pastor Maldonado could have done that.
Ricciardo will continue to be behind Norris for the rest of the year.
No shit.
Well, and if he is,
but at the end of the day, Nigel, at the end of the day, what you've got to accept sometimes is that F1 cars are bloody hard to drive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
And
and
he's
we've had this
there.
whole Red Bull thing for years, and we've lambasted Gasly, we've torn apart Albon, and now we're in the same position with Perez, and it's kind of like, hang on a second, maybe we've got to take a step back and have a look at this, have a look at F1 cars, and have a look at driving styles and driving characteristics, and the fact that it's not a case of point and squirt, it's a case of caressing a car and sort of learning how to be one with it, and like. It's really hard to do, and yeah, the greats do it, and we say that, but I think it's harder than ever before. I think we're seeing that with so much more now. Like, you would have like someone like Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello, and have things like the car would be set up for one driver, but the other driver could get a bit close. And now it's harder than ever before, I think, to get on with the specifics of a Formula One car, because the minutiae of downforce and everything is so intricate and detailed that there's so much more to it than I think we give them credit for, to be honest.
I don't know. I can't help but think that some drivers,
Are better than
give them
others.
time.
What do you do?
No, some drivers, people give them time. But
Get
then
angry.
some, you don't like Tsunoda, for example. People say, "Oh, he's been put into F1 too early and stuff." But Ricardo has been similar to Tsunoda, kind of. Okay, actually, no, he's not.
Tsunoda's been worse than
Ignore
Ricardo,
that.
A.
Tsunoda-
And B, Ricardo's
he's been better.
earned himself, with a 10-year career in F1, has earned himself time because he's proved his highs.
So why can't Tsunoda?
Because he's not been in F1 for 10 years.
Yeah, but you should give
He's
him
not been
time.
racing for 10
He's
years.
been
Give him
given
3
time.
years. Give him 2 or 3 years.
All right, we
Yeah.
are. We weren't talking about Tsunoda.
I don't know.
I genuinely, I don't know what this conversation. If you'd asked me when we started this podcast, where did Ricardo finish, I wouldn't have known, because I didn't care.
11.
I honestly, Ricardo was not a factor for me this weekend, and I don't care. Like, I don't think this is the complete nadir of his season. I think it's a bad weekend, and
Monaco
I think if he continue, if he can bounce back from this, and he can continue how he's done in the last 2 races before this, then that is okay. I think that is an improvement on where he was at the start of this season. At the start of the season, he didn't know the limits of the car. He was awful in Monaco because he didn't know what he could do with the car. I think he's beyond that point now, and he is improving. And I think if, as I say, if he can
I don't think he's improving.
Oh my goodness, he's definitely improving, mate. Come on.
What, because of one good weekend in Monza?
No, not because of one good weekend in Monza, because of a few good weekends.
Which weekends?
All right, he was on the pace in the race in Silverstone. Yeah, Norris was faster, but he was on the pace. He was on the pace in...
Which weekend?
Belgium. He did better in Belgium because Norris binned it in the wall, and Ricardo finished fourth.
Belgium's the worst example you could have chosen, mate. Look where Norris was before he binned it. He was seconds in front.
But then he binned it. That's the point. Ricardo did get fourth.
Ricardo's season seesaw. We're not disagreeing on the fact that his season's had highs and lows. I started my point by saying that, but it's just he has earned time and he has shown good results. And he's what is he in the championship? He's 8th in the championship. 8th. Anyway, he scored more points than he had to at this point with Renault last year. And so I mean, arguably in a bit of a better car. And yes, he should be doing more. Yes, he should be. Yes, you'd want the driver to be performing better, but
it's a race-winning car in his hands. It's a race-winning car. He's had, more since Silverstone. He's had 4 top 5 finishes. Before that, he'd had none. He wasn't a factor at all. And he seems to have more of a handle on where he is with the car. And I think if you're saying we should give him time, or if you're saying we'll wait and see, that's fine. There's no conclusion that can come out of this. McLaren aren't going to bin him off. It's not, there's no conclusion that comes out of this.
My conclusion is his pace deficit to Norris hasn't changed that much apart from at Monza. That's my take. That's my opinion. And I don't see how, Anyway,
cool. Let's
that was a segue, not segue, segment, sector. I don't know.
Tangent.
The last thing we have on the list seems kind of pointless in comparison. Did you like that Red Bull did a white car?
Yeah, I guess. Made it a bit difficult to
Did you like
spot.
that it was so different to what it was in all the other races this year? It wasn't blue, it was white. It was they're going to keep it as a one-off. I'm
You're
trying to
asking
cause
me.
beef. Yeah,
I think
You know
your enthusiasm for this section is really raising it up.
what? I
Um,
prefer the
I,
normal livery, actually, like genuinely.
I
I
did
think
too.
I liked this one in the photos, but I didn't think it worked as well on track. I mean, like in the pre-race photos,
Yeah.
I thought it looked banging, and then I didn't think it worked as well in track. Just as a slight tangent to that, really difficult to tell the Mercedes and the Aston Martins apart when they're starting around 10th. Like on the first lap in the wet, it's a massive pain in the ass telling which is which.
When the white Red Bull is qualifying very similarly on track to the white Alfa Romeo, that was annoying. That was really annoying. I kept seeing Giovinazzi and being like, "Oh, it's Perez," and that wasn't.
Mick Schumacher qualified
Oh yeah, and then
his best lap of the year to get into
yes,
Q2 in that Haas. Incredible lap. Yeah, it's a shame in the race, obviously, with what happened with Alonso. But yeah, mega job on Saturday from Schumacher.
it was a mega job on Saturday. We should definitely touch on that. I mean, it was a shame he was tapped by Alonso, but he probably wouldn't have finished higher than 19th anyway. But that's really good, I think.
Yeah.
And testament, he's getting to it as a driver in there. We've said about we know about Mick's junior career that if he's given a bit of time, he can start performing pretty well. And I'm not
Just shouldn't
saying
get
this
any time. He's awful. We shouldn't get any time.
but he's not. He's proving with time. He's performing. And I think next year maybe we'll see some pretty decent stuff from Mick if the Haas plan of not developing this year at all works. Who knows where Mick will be next year?
Yeah, 2.9
11th.
seconds. 2.9 seconds ahead of Mazepin as well. I think it was 4 seconds ahead in Sochi. So 2 consecutive weekends.
Hey, give Mazepin time.
I
I don't know why I'm saying this because I'm going over my own argument.
Anyway.
Adam, do you have anything to add on Mick Schumacher?
Well, that was a really awkward moment for a second there, wasn't there?
I thought Adam was going to say something. I don't think it was that awkward.
No, I've not got anything to say on Mick Schumacher. He's
anything to say on the race weekend that we haven't mentioned so far?
We have mentioned it. The whole podcast is about it.
There's David Coulthard in commentary said something like,
"Where did he finish?"
He said two banging one-liners. One of them I forgot, but one of them was like, "It'd be great if they had like a scrubbed intermediate set," or like he went on this whole thing about how good it'd be if they had a scrubbed intermediate set.
It'd been great.
And then at the end, he just said, "But none of them have it." So. Like a really pointless thing to say. It's like it'd be great if they were like in rally cars, but none of them are. So I guess we'll just have to do like I don't know. Just I like that. That's literally the only thing I had to say on this.
I've got one final question to put to the two of you to round out this. This podcast has been all over the place. Let's be honest.
I've liked it.
I think it's been great.
I have as well.
I think it's a great time. Do you think the race would have been better if it was a dry race, Adam?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
You've reminded me of something there, actually.
I'll let Nigel go first then.
I'll tell because a lot of people, from what I saw, said, "Oh, it was quite dull. It was boring, especially for a wet race," which it probably was. But I loved, the purity of it because we haven't seen, there's no DRS, great track, tough conditions, and we saw proper hard racing. If there was DRS, we would have seen more flybys and stuff. It probably would have helped Hamilton move up the order a bit. But I kind of loved the pure racing side of it, which we had, which was kind of different to the racing we've had since DRS has been introduced. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it overall. So if it was dry, we would have had DRS. It would have been a completely different race. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty good race, to be honest.
I don't know. I think
I know it's a horrible question because we have no idea.
Yeah, I'm going to say no. That I just have kind of gut feeling more than anything else. I think the kind of thing I'd add to that though is that like if Turkey doesn't make it back on next year, then I think it would be a shame not to see a dry race, like over the 2 races we've just had wet. So I think that's the only thing I kind of tag on really.
I think
but
it's weird this, but I feel like because of the weird conditions that we did have on the Sunday, sorry, which was strange as hell. I think if it had been dry, you would have got a really interesting 2-stop, 1-stop race. And I think that was looking at the tyres, the soft tyre performance on. I mean, there was such a desperation to qualify in the mediums to get into Q3 on Saturday. Oh, I get my days mixed up. I need to go to school. But I think you could have had a really interesting race, but it would have been so different. And what we did get, to be fair, was a really weird race, which kind of made it interesting all the way through in my eyes. It's like, what's going to happen here for the whole thing? So particularly when Leclerc decided to go for the win, that was actually really exciting. I found that amazing. I think it was good. I agree with you.
And things like Hamilton, he would have just breezed past Perez. We wouldn't have had that, those racing through a few corners and stuff. So, I think it was kind of nice to have those conditions, not to have DRS, and yet we still got some good racing, I thought.
Yeah, I agree with Adam. It'd be nice to see a dry race there, but also I agree with you that it was such a unique race. It was interesting. Turkey's given us 2 very weird, unique races in as many seasons, and I mean, everyone's saying, "Oh, I'm so glad we got grip here" and that kind of thing. And I agree. I love seeing that qualifying. Those qualifying times were brilliant. But I do kind of a little bit was a bit like, oh, it's not really slippy. Damn it. Because I think it would have been amazing if we had another just weekend where they're just like driving around a nice rink and the lap times are split by 20 seconds and no one knows what's going to happen. I think that I kind of last year when Turkey was soaking wet, I was a bit like, oh, I kind of wish it had been dry. It would have been amazing. It would have been so weird if last year's race was dry. You just had like Lance Stroll on pole, but then what would have happened, and the lap times are 1:40 and stuff like that. It's great. But yeah, we've gone on for a long time on this podcast. I'm going to have to do some clever editing to make it actually the file size small enough for me to be allowed to upload it. It's going to be a nightmare getting this on YouTube. But anyway, that's not your problem, dear listener.
Well, I mean, if people are watching this, then they know you succeeded.
If they're at this bit, then I am astonished.
Thanks, Taib.
Yeah, thanks, Taib. Honestly, we should just do a Zoom call, invite Taib, us 3 talk, and that's it. That's the podcast.
Yeah, don't record it.
We do ticketed events. No, we don't. We just invite Taib.
Ticketed event. Oh, yeah. That would be the drill. People.
We're going to play the Roundhouse in Croydon.
Have like Patreon.
Not Croydon, Camden.
Have the Taib tier, and the only person in it is Taib.
Yeah. In other news, if you want us to set up a Patreon, Taib, please, by all means, we'll happily have you pay us. Anyway, thanks guys for joining me for this podcast. I've really enjoyed your presence. It's been great.
It's not your birthday.
Good. Adam makes it sad.
That's a good joke.
Adam makes it really upsetting. On that really annoying note, we're going to end. Bye, guys.
Bye.
I nearly ended the meeting rather than pressing